it was great yesterday seeing how many different directions everyone is taking the time transfer work and the unpaid care work research that we've all done as part of NTA and Counting Women's Work and Agenda and the other projects. And so what I was hoping to accomplish is hearing sort of whether there's one thing that we all want to do, or just trying to get a better feel of all the different directions everyone's going in, and to see whether it's possible to sort of have another project. I mean, we talk about this all the time, and it's always a matter of sort of, is someone going to get funding and then get the extra time and energy to sort of run another thing when everybody's already maxed out, most of us. But it won't ever happen if we don't start the discussion. So I guess I wanted to start the discussion just to give you an update on Counting Women's Work. So Counting Women's Work is still exists. Our second piece of funding from the Hewlett Foundation runs out in a couple of weeks. And then there is, Hewlett has funded a third part of Counting Women's Work, but they were very emphatic about the fact that it had to be different. They weren't going to give us any money just to do the same thing, which is basically, fund country teams to do the estimates and sort of fund all of us, or fund a bunch of us to, go to some conferences and try to coordinate research within the network, but through global meeting workshops and things like that. And then try to have outreach within each of our countries to get the information that we have out to policymakers, out to media, things like that. So what we sort of went back and forth with them about is a partnership with the Population Reference Bureau, and also that Hewlett was really just set on financing the work in sub-Saharan Africa. So there's a little bit of money in the new plan just to maintain the website, to maintain communication across the network, and stuff like that. And then there's a whole piece in sub-Saharan Africa to try and have a lot of outreach with policymakers so that they can know what Counting Women's Work is, understand just the basic idea around counting unpaid care work and how it undergirds economies and what it means for women's economic empowerment and things like that. So it's a really different project now with a lot of communication and outreach stuff and not so much research money, but at least it will sort of keep going in some way. So that's what I sort of had to share about the institutional arrangements around Counting Women's Work and the time transfers. I wanted to see if anybody else was sort of going into the field with new research projects around these topics, or new data collection. I think if you were in the session last night, you heard from Ruben that the NTA group there was an important part of advocating for a time use module in their upcoming round of household surveys. So that's pretty exciting, and a whole new data set going to be available in Kenya, and that our group was sort of part of making that happen. So yay us. And if anybody else knows about anything going on like that, if there are going to be time use sections in any new grants that you guys are putting out, I just wanted us to get a chance to talk to each other about all that. So there are 19 of us on the call. I can see some of your faces, but why don't we give it a try to just sort of unmute yourself and talk? And if that turns into a mess, I'll try something like, doing the raise your hand thing or whatever. But for now, let's just give it a shot to see if we can just have an open conversation. So if you have anything that you want to share, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Just a very short comment regarding time use data as regards my country, Italy. Actually, I was very, me and other also researchers here in Italy, we were quite sad to hear that they wanted to make the survey less frequent in Italy. So this was a surprising thing because there was a lot of, in Italy as a country, but in general, there was a lot of emphasis on the importance of those of time use data. So it was really a very, there was a general agreement that those data are really important, that they should, we should improve the survey, they should be more frequent, and then they decided suddenly to cut it. So it was very unexpected. But then, after the pandemic, the COVID situation, they decided that maybe, given that we all know this pandemic has made more visible problems that already existed regarding the care dimension. So now I just heard a few days ago that yes, we will have another round. So they decided to, the National Office of Statistics decided to invest money again. But this to me was really very unexpected to hear that the survey was going to be not cancelled, but to be like every so that they wanted to collect the data every maybe I don't know, 5 or more years, and now we have it every 3 years. So it was really unexpected that they wanted to disinvest in the survey. So this I really, and then of course this exceptional situation and the thing changed. But this is just, I don't know, something that made me feel think a lot. As you were commenting, Gretchen, as we heard yesterday, there is thanks to advocacy, there will be a new time use model for a country. So maybe I don't know. This is something to do, to insist, to really stress the importance. As we ask as a project, they put even more energy, more commitment in stressing the relevance of those data. And this is, with this situation, terrible situation that we are all living, we now understand even better that this information is very relevant for social policies. And maybe, I don't know, my comment is just this. So thanks.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that sort of, as all the tons of bad things to come out of it, one of the good things seems to come out of it, that there's much more awareness that the care economy exists. We are on calls with our colleagues with kids running around, and we are worried about care homes and care arrangements for elders, and it's certainly much more in the press than it has been in a long time. And so it's, in some ways, it's a good time to be in this field. I should also compliment Marina on the paper that you and your colleague did about the care and COVID. I'm so glad also that the sort of me being lame not getting back to people about that survey, that you didn't wait too long and just went ahead and did it. I was so excited when this all happened to get in the field with a big survey, and then of course the reality of all the things that had to be done hit, and it kind of went silent. But many of the country groups and other people sort of galloped ahead with it, so that's great. Anyone else?
Yeah, so an update, Gretchen, from the last time we had a communication about Singapore. The last round of time use surveys that we were trying to initiate for the first time, a nationally representative time use survey for Singapore. This was back in 2018. It didn't happen. The funding got pulled for that time use survey, so I wasn't able to do it then. But we are now about to start on another round of NTA, and I have some approval to sort of add to that a time use element as well. There has been a small time use survey that I can access that will then be used as the time use element. So I will have, hopefully by this time next year, a full set of NTA as well as NTTA that I can hopefully share some initial results with the team here.
That's great. That's too bad that the funding got pulled. Hopefully now they're wishing that they knew a little more about how people were using their time, and in light of the stresses on the care economy now, but hopefully you'll get a chance to do more in the future. So thanks. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so in Slovenia we have these problems that the last one, the time use survey, was done in 2000, and they are promising that they will give us another round, but it still does not exist. And that's why with some colleagues we have decided to collect the data about the use of time, but it's like privately collected data. They needed to report so the time used before the COVID and during the lockdown, and the results are pretty interesting, I must say. So and we now plan to also do another round after the pandemic is going to be finished, so to see if these gender roles have changed somehow on the long run, because we could see that indeed for childcare now men devoted much more time to this care, but we also realized that for example for other household work, like for cooking, cleaning and so on, the differences are actually not that big. So it's still women who do this, but indeed for the childcare, so there are huge differences compared to the pre-pandemic time. So we will see if this will somehow change the rules. So this was an initial idea, but we have only like 600 households in this survey. So the sample size is not that big, but it somehow captures the social demographic differences among people. So it was quite good, so according to my opinion. And this is just something that I wanted to share with you. Okay.
Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, that sounds like 600, better than nothing. Yeah, in the session, I think on Monday when they were talking about doing the estimates for Hawaii, and could they also have sort of time transfer unpaid care work estimates for Hawaii. So I looked up how many Hawaiian households there were in the American Time Use Survey, and for I think 2018 it was 28. So the answer there was no, I can't make Hawaiian estimates out of 28 households. I mean, you can, but should you? So.
Just regarding this issue of the time use survey during the COVID, there is the possibility, but I mean, it's still not sure, but it's a good, we have, I mean, it's a possibility that we will, so we also did this following the Gretchen email on this regard. We also had a survey in Italy, and it's based on the period before, during, and after the lockdown. And we also added, since as you, since this is really my main focus in this recently, I also added some information on the well-being of people in doing activities. With this also, if they felt less or more something during this lockdown, but related to us in association to time use activities. So in doing something, not in general. And there is this possibility. So we had 1,000 people responding to the survey. I was quite happy about this. I didn't expect, actually, I expect, I mean, a lower number of respondents, but the idea is to make it a bit, the sample a bit larger, especially because we have a lot of women and men are super, I mean, they are not represented mostly. And so the idea is to have some target questionnaires so that to make the sample more less biased, and then maybe we can calculate weights. So we have some funding left from one project we had together with also Austria and France, Hippolyte, Alexia on NTA and well-being, more or less. This was the idea and since in Italy we still need to use some of this money, maybe this is a good opportunity that we can use this money to enlarge to make more interviews. So this is an idea that I wanted to. For sure, if this will happen, I will write to you and let you know.
Okay. Yeah, when I set up the survey on SurveyMonkey back in, I guess, May, and just tried to push it out sort of through social media, the vast majority of people who responded are just like me. So obviously my social networks are not very diverse. I mean, it was sort of high education, people, women with kids and a partner, and, you know, was like people just like me. And that's one set of circumstances in the care economy, but certainly not the vast majority of people's experiences. So SurveyMonkey itself has a service. I mean, they will field a representative sample for you. You just pay them. And that I think it was like basically $2 a respondent or something, depending on sort of the more criteria you wanted to balance on in the sample that they would recruit for you, the more expensive it was. So that was sort of an interesting business model. But that is a pretty easy way to go. You know, I have no idea how good that gets you, you know, how SurveyMonkey's idea of fielding a nationally representative sample along blah, blah, blah characteristics actually meets what a survey scientist would consider sort of the same criteria. I imagine there's probably some literature out there saying that the samples are terrible, but I haven't read it yet, so I don't know that. But that's certainly another way to go, and it's pretty quick. Alrighty. Just see if there's anybody else who wants to talk about things, and then just go on to kind of see, just summarize a few directions that I see things going in the future, and ask sort of who's going where. Alrighty. So when all of this stuff started, I think our main sort of juice on international attention and academic attention was sort of women's economic empowerment, and how the care economy the unpaid work care economy might be preventing women from full integration in market work. And that seemed to be where the most attention was being paid, and certainly where most of us were getting funding for these kinds of things, that those were the issues. The richer the countries, the more it was, oh no, where are we going to get labor force from in the future? Maybe women can provide our labor force, only we are going to have to, you know, ease their burdens in the household so that they can have more fully integrated into the regular labor market. So that's definitely still out there. What I see is a big strain of trying to integrate unpaid care work into macro models. say I know a project at American University that some of us had some interaction with. They're trying to take the World Bank's model that they use to determine their lending to countries and get them to integrate unpaid care work into that model. There's the direction that Marina is going, which is the well-being idea, sort of how is our care arrangements affecting well-being. And that's pretty exciting for NTA too, because we've never done that. I mean, we've never really been in that kind of research area, even with regular NTA. We've just sort of said, okay, consumption is our well-being measure. That's like the final, you know, thing that we're going to care about, who's consuming, how, and but broadening our definition of sort of well-being to not just be sort of final consumption is kind of interesting and exciting. There is the care economy and COVID. That's a big deal to figure out how these things have changed and what that change is going to mean for gender equity, for overall economic growth. I mean, that's another really exciting thing that I see, is that there's more and more attention being paid in the global conversation to the fact that the unpaid care work economy underlies market economy. And certainly all of us have been saying that the whole time, but now that the care economy in some ways has kind of collapsed, there is a lot more understanding on the part of people who never cared about it, who never cared about care, to realize that people can't go to work if they don't have their family care situation taken care of. There's the subgroups that is certainly, so disaggregation globally is the name of the game. It's getting harder and harder to go anywhere and put up an average number for a country and not spend the rest of the time talking about how it differs by subgroups. And so along that, many of you, as we saw yesterday, are going in that direction, and that's really great, because certainly NTA as a whole, if we're going to stay relevant, has to stop just putting up one line for age profiles. And then there are some exciting methodology innovations out there. I was really interested in what Jordana did. I mean, Brazil for a long time has wanted to have the time transfer accounts, but they don't have a survey. And so their sort of hybrid model of taking a couple items in some household surveys, but then using neighboring countries' actual time NTTA to just assume that we're like them in a whole bunch of ways, made it possible to sort of squeeze blood from the stone, you know, to make kind of something out of not very much. So that's exciting, because that means many of us, if we're in a country that doesn't have a time use survey, we can do those things too. Certainly could, I mean, I enjoy showing India's survey from 1999 around the world, because then everybody says, why are you showing something from 1999? And I get to shame India for not having another time use survey. But you know, maybe we can apply the same method that Jordana used to get estimates from Brazil to India, and sort of update those in some ways. So, and Bernard also had interesting, I mean, the work that you put up there with the pyramids and including the unpaid care work in those pyramids was great. So I also wanted to see if anybody out there was sort of trying new things with the time transfer accounts methodology, if you had new ideas, or if there was something in the old methodology that wasn't working for you. I'd really like to hear about that. So if anybody wants to talk about work they're doing in any of those new areas, so methodology, COVID, well-being, macro models, subgroups. Here's another question. So any of you who have done the care estimates and put them out into the world, is there any interest in those estimates being sort of revived or enhanced because of COVID and the lockdowns and the upheavals in the care economy? Go ahead.
COVID, but we have like a sort of plan that we are working on a micro simulation model that I will present later. And for the moment, we have some part of the model is micro and some part is more macro. And we have built for the moment the NTAs by family time and education, and we use it as a parameter of the model. So what we are doing now is building the NTTAs by education and family type. And we are still doing that. I don't know how nice they will look because the sample size is a limitation, but we are building that. So, and then we will combine both NTTAs and NTAs in the macro, more macro part of the model. And in the future, we want to go more micro, but of course there is the limitation that NTAs, you don't have any income data in the time use survey, so you cannot really do it. But using education, we'll see if we can do something, you know. But yeah, we are doing that basically. And Ellie is not here now, but Ellie is also trying to spread the survey you did. I guess you know that, but just to know.
Yeah, and I didn't help by not getting back to her quickly enough about her question.
No, this is I didn't even know, so no, don't worry.
Okay.
So we are in that. So it's more a micro model, but also has a macro module, and I will explain it later. Yeah. So
okay.
These are our plans for the moment. Yeah.
And is the goal of that model, I guess, so ultimately the goal is that unpaid care work just becomes another part of the economy. And if you build a big macro model, care is in there because, oh, well, you know, it'd be like leaving out self-employment income. Like, why would you do that? That's dumb. So is the model you're building specifically to address issues in the care economy, or is it a model for economic outcomes that, because it's part of the world, you are including unpaid care work in?
Yeah, for the moment we're doing the more economic part, and the main goal is to have the NTAs by family type longitudinally, you know, to be able to see how. Okay. And then of course we want to complement it with the time. This is what we want to do. Yeah, but this is like a plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Bernard, you unmuted.
Yes. Now we're just generating new NTA data for Austria for 2015. It's not possible for the NTTA because the last time use survey was in 2010. But nevertheless, we try to combine the estimates, and the focus is really on estimates of private transfers, both in the market and the non-market, by family type. Because this age pattern we observe for private transfers, it's not actually much dependent on the age of the person, but more on the age of the children. And so this can generate a lot of insights, because there is a huge inequality. The people are different depending if they have children or if they have not. So I think that can be really useful to analyze the situation of families and of parents. So I would encourage to go in this direction, to distinguish by family type, additional to age, because this is how the age patterns are shaped. Children are at home.
That's back in, like a decade ago now. I split up some of my early US estimates by sort of family type for single parenthood versus nuclear family, other, and a lot of the sex difference in overall unpaid care work was kind of soaked up because there's a lot of single parenthood in the US, and the vast majority of those households were women. And so very different from the usual interpretation of sort of women in households doing all the work while the men do nothing. Like, they're in separate households. So yeah, that would be good to put that front and center, because it sort of just structurally explains so much of the overall pattern.
So I had a quick question on that as a follow-up. So I'm wondering, how much of this can be folded into this idea of the distributional national transfer account picture? That is the idea of trying to create these micro data files, which then reflect the macro economy, so that, you know, instead of like we're doing it now, splitting it up into, okay, these little boxes, either a box of age and then a box of age versus socioeconomic status, we just have one micro model that contains all of these variables together. Is that what everyone's kind of working toward? Question mark, yeah.
It's certainly what the U.S. is trying to do. I mean, it's really hard. As you know, Andy said he didn't realize how hard it was going to be to sort of pick out an NTA for Hawaii, and yeah, I mean, I think at least for the U.S. group, it comes down to the Frankenstein model that I have made of the U.S. accounts, just pulling bits from every sort of data corpse I could find and sewing them onto the consumer expenditure survey.
So they get sewn on by like an imputation procedure. You're trying to impute, and then you maintain all these micro relationships.
Yeah.
So that gets to this point of, okay, then you're seeing the household. You're seeing households with kids in them. You're seeing Okay, so that's fabulous, and that seems like that's something that's going to work in countries like the U.S. and places over in Europe, et cetera. But it seems like it's going to be very hard for some of the most of the NTA countries to implement that kind of stuff. Is that right? I'm just a question mark again. I'm thinking it would be hard. I don't know for a fact, but I'm just imagining just the amount of data, the richness of the data sources available in Europe and the US is going to be a lot different than what we'd see like in Latin America. Question mark. We got Latin Americans online. They'll correct me.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of people who don't have their video cameras on, which is totally fine, but those people should also feel free to unmute yourself and say things if you want.
I will say something if nobody else wants. I think this micro NTA are anyway everywhere a challenge. As soon as you have to combine different data, I think you must know what your research question is, because maintaining all these micro relationships is almost impossible. When I know, okay, I'm analyzing parental status, I'm imputing data so that this specific micro relationship is maintained, but I cannot take into account everything.
Right, that any category that you want to pull out has to have been baked in to the original estimates, the original linking of other sources, or you run the risk of saying like, I found a thing, and the only reason you found the thing is because a connection between two different data sets was only partial. You know, like you just really run the risk of finding a thing that is not a thing.
Yeah,
is that
the
sort
risk
of,
is that you find your own assumption more or less in the results.
Yeah.
You should write that down. I like that phrase, finding a thing that's not a thing.
Isn't that what the kids say? Like, that's not a thing.
That should be like a slogan or an anti-slogan. That should not be the NTA slogan. Finding things that aren't things. The NTA network. No, we don't want that.
Hey, I actually think team is well. There's really a good point in terms of how you combine or how you take whatever micro explorations are being done to the macro level, and that is a challenge, as Bernard was saying, in terms of. But I think one way to go might be to go by the life cycle stage and trying to make an argument. For example, how much of the economic contribution is the paid care work of women while they are still married? And how does that change by the time they get married? And same with men. How do things change when they are on merit in school and out of work versus how things change as soon as they start working or as soon as they get married, and how do things change, how much of a general economic contribution might be once they have children, as Gretchen was saying. But I don't think we can take it much further than that, probably. Well, that's just an idea.
Okay. May I add something?
Of
Also,
course.
another thing that I would like to explore very much, and that I think that this might also be a relevant information, not only, I mean, related to time use as it is, but so the basic idea, I think that we should also produce measures of time poverty and combine measure of time poverty with income poverty. I know that there are already different research projects working on time poverty, but we could add something, because here we have two relevant information dimensions that are gender and age. And this disaggregation is something that very often is missing. So I think that this might really be a relevant information, how the two things are related, and whether there is an association with time poverty and income poverty or not. And this might, and if there is, does this association exist for women, for men, for both? So this this might be really, and also something, you know, also this relation between the use of time, apart from time poverty and income poverty, also the use of time at different stage of life, and then the social exclusion and poverty. So I'm thinking on many women, for example, in Italy, they are out of the labor market, they produce, my window, they produce a lot of unpaid work during central ages, and then they have very low pensions at older ages, and they have high risk of poverty, which is a problem for the whole country, because this is not only something that, I mean, that generates inequality, and that's something that might be not, that we might judge and not right, but also it's a problem from an objective point of view. So I don't know, because of course we don't have longitudinal data, so we can't not study really this association, but there might be some opportunity to integrate and to combine this information. This, I think, might be a really interesting direction to work, considering that we can add this age-specific information that other research projects, they do not really explore.
Yeah, thank you, Marina. That's good points. Now, is that something that could only be explored in a distributional NTA kind of thing, or could you compare sort of averages? Yeah, I mean, it seemed like poverty is kind of a distributional concept. You know that in any country you have some poverty and some not, so it's absolutely within a mean.
I mean, it's just, I'm not sure from an operational point of view how this could be realized. It's something we should, if someone else, it's interest, maybe we can try to develop an idea, because this is just something that was into my mind, but I really didn't think very much how to practically do it.
You could just send the proposal tomorrow. No, just kidding.
But I know that the Levy Institute is really working a lot on this issue. So maybe first, something that I can do is really check out what they are doing, because we don't, it's not useful to replicate something that already exists. So maybe this can be a first thing to do.
No, that's a good point. And I know that, yeah, so they have sort of a time adjusted measure of poverty that sort of adds people who also are experiencing time poverty, or at least also includes the fact that depending on a household's labor market attachment, it may be more or less hard for them to meet their needs because parents either, or families either don't have as much time as another family, or have plenty of it even when it looks like maybe they don't have as much income. So yeah, and I'm not familiar with exactly how those measures work either. So if that's something that we are set up to sort of replicate across the globe, because I know they've just done it in a handful of countries, or if it's possible to sort of create that kind of index modified maybe for averages so that you can have a cross-country comparative measure in a pretty quick way, as opposed to sort of the time it takes to do an in-depth country study for each country. That certainly would be cool. Tim, go ahead.
I had one other question, or just something I just missed. Sorry, because I was actually asleep. That's why I'm here late. I just woke up and grabbed a couple. So I missed the first part. But I don't know if you mentioned the thing about the issue of how we can extend the NTTAs into countries which don't have great data sources. And if there's a big project going on that, because I think it'd be tremendous to get these NTTAs, like in Africa, for example, would be a great step forward and really policy relevant.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think, I haven't read Jordana's paper that she presented yesterday, but sort of the nitty gritty of how she used the Colombia and Paraguay estimates to then sort of make results for Brazil, which, I mean, they looked reasonable to me. I don't know. I remember a long time ago, I think it was Juha Alo saying, good data looks like what good data looks like. So looks like good data to me. But yeah, if that is something that we could extend across the whole, many more countries, and sort of the way that, Andy and the Hawaii folks imputed a whole bunch of NTAs for the rest of the globe, that would be great. So the first thing I'm going to do towards that end is to read Jordana's paper completely, but if anybody else wanted to join me in that, and then maybe we could work on a way to do this sort of with the estimates we have and extend them around to get much more coverage in regions. Or if anybody else had any other methods to do this kind of thing.
Sorry, so the coffee is probably kicking in, so I'm talking a lot.
Go, be the idea hamster.
But one other question is, are you all thinking about specific policies? So for example, testing out or making comparisons between the countries and saying, oh, look, Italy has this particular policy in place, and we look a lot different than Sweden.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are some global policy databases that have family policy, and then there are just a family policy global comparative database out there.
But like, I'm thinking of like, like the folks from, I don't know, Uruguay could do a comparison between their NTTA and the NTTA of, I don't know, Denmark? I don't know. And then the two teams could like explain why these differences exist between the countries. Maybe the Uruguayans could head to Denmark. Maybe the UN, maybe we, the UN, could fund the Uruguayans to go to Denmark. Do the Uruguayans even want to go to Denmark?
I don't think anybody wants to go anywhere right now.
Well, they're online. We can hear what, here we go. Okay, Marisa, adelante.
I think it is okay. But I think there are other peculiarities in Latin America that are good to be compared with Europe. For example, as I said yesterday, the extent of hiring domestic services, that it is very usual in Latin America, and informality, because I think that it is easier to combine market work when informality is high. But well, I know that. Well, I can say also, Gretchen, that we are carrying out a survey in the framework of COVID. I don't talk because I don't talk English very often, so, and it is very early in the morning, so I don't want to talk. But we are carrying out the survey, and we have the same problems you mentioned about, we have a lack of men, and we also have problems with low educated persons. I think we have two problems. One is communication to reach them. But another problem that I saw in that with low educated persons, we have two problems. One is to reach them because because they use cell phones, so
Yeah.
you need the number. So, well, you can try to approach persons that you realize they're low educated and ask them, could you please fill a survey? You can have, give me your telephone number, etc. But once you do that, the answer is that, I know they are afraid of filling a survey. They don't know how to do it. So, well, I don't know. We will not have this type of population in the survey, even if we make an effort. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's only so much we can do about that. And as long as, I think, I mean, especially with all of the rapid instruments that people have pushed out to understand COVID dynamics, it seems that you just have to be upfront about what you can actually represent accurately. Robert, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It's just a brief response to Tim's question. We have finished the paper comparing parents and non-parents, including NTA and NTTA figures in Europe. And currently we are exploring cross-country differences among countries which are in our sample. They are just European countries, but any idea of or interest of policy or whatever question you have would be more than welcome, because it's still a work in process, in progress.
To get back to Tim's question about policy, I mean, some of the interest of the global interest in understanding the time use and care work dynamics did come from low fertility countries trying to figure out how did we get here? How did we make the idea of having parents be so terrible that no one wants to do it anymore? Like, maybe we should look at what the experience of raising children is like, so that we can understand how to make it more attractive to more people. I don't know if that's still out there. Certainly concerns about low fertility still are, but I guess it runs up into the problem that no country has really gone very far in really trying to make it not quite so difficult. I mean, certainly there are plenty of child subsidies out there, but none of them come even close to getting the full cost of the time and the goods of any kid. So jump in, Tim.
Gosh, I'm sorry. I've just had.
Why are you sorry?
I've had a ton of coffee. I took a ton of coffee to try to wake myself up this morning. But the one thing just to mention is that sometimes when we're helping countries think about their long run future, so we're doing like fertility projections, and they want to know, oh, are we headed to 1.5 fertility, or are we headed to 2? And that makes a huge difference in these types of projections. And so one of the things we show is a work showing that there's a strong correlation between the gender equality index and completed fertility levels. So those that are high on the gender equality index tend to be around 2, and those that are low are down around 1.5. And so that kind of ties in issues of gender equality with demographic phenomena, trying to do these projections. So one possibility that would be fascinating to look at is to look at these fertility outcomes by these kind of measures that you're going to be developing, like the time, time poverty and these other things that you're looking at to measure these impacts.
Yes, maybe I can mention that so team, we started to work on this actually. I mean, with Gretchen and Tanya, we had a poster, at the International Population Conference, and I didn't really follow up because I just found it difficult. So I used NTA and NTTA to see how much or how much men and women invest in children, in the sense that how much income they generate and how much unpaid care or unpaid household labor they do, and then but then I still found it, so there were some relations, but then I didn't really follow up because I thought that this was, so there are so many, I thought that there are really many things that we cannot really take into account when we use NTA and NTTA, so we cannot take into account how the childcare policies in the different countries, US with no childcare, Hungary, women stay at home for 3 years, and then in Germany, they are then part-time. So they go back to the labor force earlier, but then they work part-time. So I thought that, there are so many of these things that we cannot take into account, and this is not a micro approach, and then I thought that eventually we just need a micro approach because it doesn't work out with NTA and NTTA. So I don't know what's your idea about that. Maybe if we have more and more countries. So now I think we have almost 25 countries with both NTA and NTTA, but I'm still not sure that this is the way to go to analyze things like this. So what's your opinion? I'm a little doubtful,
The UN has never been afraid of the ecological fallacy, that's for sure.
That's right. No, because my feeling is no. Well, one thing is that's one reason to have this big expansion into these other countries. If we can think of like a quick hack that will work more or less okay, and we can rapidly expand into other countries. I mean, it's not going to have the rigorous, we could even classify them. Like Group A are countries where we've got the really detailed data, and Group B are countries where we're kind of winging it as best we can, because it's important to get the information there, because people are making decisions. That's I guess the main thing that's going on is people are making, it's like the same thing that happened with the COVID pandemic. People are going to be making decisions, and they're going to be right or wrong, and they're going to be making them like with or without us. And so it's good that we raise our voices and show what we got, even if we have doubts about it. So I would say it would be great to rapidly expand the project with a bunch of Group B Group B countries, using whatever hack we can to get a lot of countries in there, and then see if we can tease out some relationships. But even really basic stuff is enough to get countries moving in the right direction. Yeah. Although that's a whole nother question, is like, what is the right direction? How can NTTA inform us about directions, where we want to go?
So maybe this is a good time to sort of pivot towards a different set of questions. And I sort of tried to ask some of these yesterday, but so all of us are out there doing our research and then hopefully talking to people about it. talking to people outside of the research community, whether that is policymakers, general press, just other departments or people in our areas who are not specifically working on the same things we are. And I just wanted to see if anybody had anything they wanted to share about how this research is connecting with people other than us. What is the interest out there on other people's parts in what we do? Are people receptive to it? Is there problems with sort of how we're talking about things that maybe is making it hard to sort of communicate the data? Or is there a great deal of interest and people are fascinated, but there's some other way that we could connect with our outside audiences? So this is something I don't think we've really tried to do very much as a project, but try and figure out more about how the outside world perceives us and what we do, and how we can communicate better. And maybe if there's something that the other people who might be consumers of our research really want to know that maybe we're not addressing about it. If anybody had any comments about that. And oh, go ahead, Christopher, please.
Yeah, let me try. I had one round of funding pulled pre-COVID. This is 2 years ago. And my worry this time around is that everybody's firefighting, and they're firefighting in respect to income, and so they're worried about the market economy and the impacts of COVID on the market economy, and therefore even less emphasis is now going to be put on the non-market aspects. And the assumption is that well, if you're not working, you have more time to do the non-market activities, and therefore let's worry about that. Focus on the market economy. So that's my worry at the moment. That it gets more challenging to get funding for time transfer work.
And do you think there's a legitimate case to be made there, or rather how we could better make the case that just like fighting disease is economic policy, because you can't really resume your robust economy until people are no longer afraid to go outside, that the care economy undergirds the workings of your market economy? You can't get income unless people are able to go outside the home and know that their children are somehow being cared for. Or, I mean, I guess then the issue is like, well, they are being cared for because my wife's staying home, and so like she used to, or like maybe she always should have, darn it. That would be sort of the scenario in which COVID reinforces old, more traditional separation of roles.
Yeah. So maybe the argument is better made that we've been undervaluing the non-market economy. That that there is that maybe if we had applied more appropriate values for the non-market economy, if we had applied better valuation or pricing of each hour of time that is unpaid in unpaid work, that maybe our GDP in the past, our real GDP has been understated, and if we had to value that more appropriately, I think you guys have been more at this for a longer time than I have, but I do think that we can communicate that non-market, the value of the non-market economy much better.
Well, another dimension that in the UN that going forward in this is looking at gender equality issue. So that's why, in fact, the SDG indicator 5.4.7 is looking at this proportion of unpaid hours done by sex. So instead of looking at market versus non-market kind of economy issue, we could channel into gender equality issue that is it's more like gender issue, so it's not being influenced by economic recession and COVID, because gender issue is always one of the main issue internationally in the UN. You know, that is one way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly, I mean, the big worry about what's going on now is that all decades of progress is being lost. So, wow, it's 6:09. Time has marched on. So I think we'll all get ready to close us up here, but maybe ask anybody who has not, who hasn't been part of the conversation so far, and maybe you logged on because you had some expectations about what we were going to do, that maybe those haven't been met. I would love for you to tell us a bit about that, and that sort of what were you hoping to hear that maybe we didn't talk about, and can keep that conversation going offline or just within the network.
Gretchen,
yes.
if we can have a continued conversation about how we might run the online surveys. You mentioned SurveyMonkey,
yep.
And you know, I'd be grateful if you could share with me, you know, your experiences with that,
sure.
that model. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we are over time, I'll definitely take that offline, and maybe I could just write a quick post on that and put that on the Counting Women's Work website, and then stick a link to that in another sort of time, use, and gender working group email. That's pretty easy to do. But yeah, and SurveyMonkey is certainly one of many, but there are plenty out there, and I only have experience with the one, but I know I have plenty of colleagues who've used the others. So that could possibly be helpful.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you everybody for coming, and I hope we used your time well. I'll just try to write up a little bit, a little report on things and put it up on the website so that we have a little record. And we'll see you later on in the day. It looks like a long day, so take naps. Keep up your stamina. Don't get zoomed out. All right. Bye-bye. And thank you, East West Center. I'm so sorry for dragging you all out in the middle of your sleep.